Hi, welcome to the Elite Performance Channel, born from the belief that every individual deserves the choice to rise above mediocrity and become the best version of themselves. Now, this is the space where leaders, achievers, and top performers share their battle testers insights. I'm Shakti, your host, and together we'll explore the mission, mindset, and mastery that empower trailblazers to thrive under pressure and achieve elite performance in their respective fields. Now, each episode brings you powerful stories, proven strategies, and practical science you can model to elevate your own performance. So let's dive in. And today, now I'm beyond excited to introduce our guest, Dr. Richard Bandler. He's the co-founder of NLP and one of the most game-changing voices in the personal development. For decades, his work has been empowered millions to transform how they think, communicate, and perform at their best. So get ready. It's a real honor to welcome Dr. Richard Bandler to the Elite Performance Channel.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Hi, Dr. Bandler. It's really a proud moment for Elite Performance Channel to have you here. Thank you so much.
Well, you're more than welcome.
And sir, now that you are here, I would like to first of all take this time to really thank you for all the work you have done and to have NLP in this world, because I think it has changed millions of lives, and I'm one of that million who felt that NLP has done a lot of difference in terms of my way and quality of life. So thank you, sir.
Well, you're more than welcome. I spent 55 years developing technologies, and the way I feel is I'm just getting warmed up.
Then I'm looking forward for all the updates that's going to come up the next few years. And thank you. And so let's dive in, to some of the key things that I wanted to ask you for today for our viewers. Now this podcast is specifically for individuals to be able to perform. So I just want to check. Dr. Bandler, you have shaped how millions understand human potential through NLP. So can you share a defining moment in your journey when you realized the power of language and the mind to transform performance?
Well, way back in the dark ages, in the early 70s, I discovered a psychotherapist who was quite elegant and very good at what she did. And when I went to watch her work, she actually was visiting next door, and she asked if I would drive her somewhere because she didn't drive that well. And I think she just didn't like driving herself. She wasn't used to it. But I drove her roughly 4 hours. And during that 4 hours, she explained to me what was going to happen. And I kept asking, she was going to see a family. And she literally said to me, she said, when I talk to the daughter, everything is going to be okay, but then I'm going to turn and talk to the father, and the daughter's going to have an epileptic seizure. She was an epileptic. And I said, have you seen this family before? And she went, no. And I thought, as a scientist, because my background is more in hard sciences, I thought, that's great. If somebody in psychology can predict what's going to happen, they must have formulas. And I found out later she had no formulas. But when she was working, everybody kept saying she's so intuitive. And that translates in symbolic logic to, I don't have to learn this. It's not learnable, that it's something that's in a person by virtue of their genome or something. And as we know, there are 22,000 genes, and not one of them is a therapy gene. Not one of them is an education gene. There's not a basketball gene. None of those talents that people have, they're developed through knowledge, understanding, and a lot of hard work. And Virginia had spent years seeing families and had built intuitions. But just because something's intuitive doesn't mean it's not structured. That we have a neurological base. Just like we have DNA, DNA is more like a hard drive. It doesn't actually make things. It has to be talked to in order to be making things. The RNA, the cell membranes, all of those things tell our genes that they need to manufacture another cell and what kind of cell it is. When we get sick, we get bacteria in our body. We make something that will kill the bacteria, and we start manufacturing it. But that comes from getting the information from the outside. Now, scientists over the years didn't look at the brain as having structure. They looked at it as an organic lump. Noam Chomsky came along and said it had structure, and that structure was mathematical, predictable, and even though languages sounded different, they had the same structures underneath. That he built a model called transformational grammar, which I learned from John Grinder. And when Grinder and I worked together, he was one of the best transformational grammarians, one of the best syntacticians on the face of the earth. And we together modeled what Virginia Satir did, what Milton Erickson did, what people did that were highly intuitive, and then began to move on to people who had good memories, people that had skills in sports, people that were good salesmen, began to model the difference between the intuitions of high performance people. So it wasn't so much a moment, it was more like 10 years of really hard work that built NLP. And when we founded the field, in the late 70s, and made it an official field because we realized Chomsky had a model of language. We had a meta model of language. That is a model that was about the model, and it was more neurological than it was psychological. The big difference between NLP and psychology itself is that we're trying to get the neurology to restructure itself so that we take advantage of the neurocortical pathways, how they work, how they build, how they learn, how they remember, how they overlap in the cortexes, the motor cortex, so that we influence the body to influence the mind and the mind to influence the body. Because if you change the way you think, it will change how you feel, and therefore change what you're actually capable of doing.
All right. And so since the time when you started with John Grinder for, coming up with NLP, how has it evolved the last, 30 years plus to 40 years from where you started to now?
Well, that's a long road. John and I spent a decade together. I think we wrote 7 or 8 books together. We used to sit for hours, 30, 40 hours at a time, reading medical journals from beginning to the end, the Journal of Neurology, the Journal of Audiology. We just consumed information about everything about the body. We weren't reading so much about psychology. We figured out early in the game that most of the psychology was theories, not talking about the structure of the brain and how it functioned. The reason we discovered accessing cues instead of other people is because we'd had 2 things. One, we read a lot of research, and a woman named Dorothy Kimura mentioned that she had done research where she had noticed something about eye movements. And then we had the advantage of having a lot of people around us. We taught at college. We would go in and ask structured questions and watch what happened instead of interpret what happened. Most psychologists believed if you looked away, you were avoiding something. And basically, it's a neurological signal that you're accessing, either remembered or constructed images. And they're done in different hemispheres in different ways and have different eye movements. And when people access auditorily, their eyes go down and to the left. When they access kinesthetically, they go down and to the right. And, in English, there's even a phrase where you go, it's downright important. It's embedded in the language. And paying attention to sensory, because we discovered early on that there's levels of things. And one of them is real simple. There's sensory input. There's how we represent that input. And then how we store that input and how we retrieve that input. And, if you look at what people learn and what people are capable of doing, there's a neurological base, there's a socialization depending upon what language they speak and where they grow up, and individual history. And all of those 3 things influence how people think. But the ways in which they think are neurologically determined to start with, not whether they'll use it well or use it badly, but our ability to make pictures and to have feelings. We have part of our nervous system is the connections between the hollow and solid organs and the intestines, called the entemic nervous system, that goes up through the old brain, and our cortexes overlap about 30 to 40%. So the brain itself, the difference between feelings and pictures and sounds is tenuous at best. So this is why when we change how we look at people, the size of a picture, how close it is to us, where it's located, all of those things influence how we feel, because there's in the brain, the difference between feelings and pictures neurologically isn't that big a deal. There's an overlap in the cortex. And our ability to influence those things by controlling both the feelings and controlling the thoughts, whether they're sound, pictures, whether they're constructed, whether they're remembered, all of these things influence the quality of our memories and how functional those memories drive us into performance.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bandler. And now I'll just move on, which is more towards mission or the why. Now, you have always emphasized helping people break patterns and unlock new choices. So
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last sentence.
Yeah, so you have always emphasized helping people break patterns and unlock new choices. So, what's the
people
driving...
are really good learners. The problem is they learn a lot of nonsense. And when you learn a lot of nonsense, you repeat that nonsense over and over again. That, somebody has something terrible happen to them and they start visualizing it 25, 30 times a day. To begin with, it's time consuming. It adds up. If it's 2 minutes here and 3 minutes there and 5 minutes here, pretty soon you're looking at, 30 minutes to an hour a day that you're remembering something that was unpleasant in the first place. And then if you go to therapy, they have you to relive it a few times, which even makes it worse. It's just not a functional way of changing the way you think. The problem isn't not that you can remember what happened. The problem is that you remember it as if it's happening. And when you do that, you feel bad to some degree the way you did when it happened. And it only reinforces the neurocortical pathways that you learned from the event. So you need to change the way you think. And very often putting a border around a memory, shrinking it down to the size of a small postage stamp, turning it white, turning it black, and going brrrr, will make it so that the kinesthetics are not strong anymore. You'll still remember that it happened, but the picture won't be big and overwhelming. The size of the screen, many people remember traumas, and when they're looking at them, the picture is actually twice as big as the real event. People's heads are twice as big. Somebody gets attacked in an alley at night, and when they remember it, the person attacking them is twice as big. People who are afraid of spiders, typically when I ask them, are you really afraid of spiders? And you can see them be terrified. And I'll go, how big is the picture in the spider in your picture? And they'll put their hands up like this. It's a lobster spider, and, not only is it big, the picture is moving towards them. So they're really scared. When I do seminars and I go, we're bringing snakes and spiders in 7 days, people get afraid ahead of time, which means it's not the spider that scares them, it's the idea of it. And the easiest thing in the world to change is your ideas.
Right. And Dr. Bandler, could it be also a case that such experience that people have could also, their previous experience and so on, could also cause them to have that self-limiting belief in certain things? Now, an example is what? Self-limiting belief. For example, a person who had having a bad experience on stage before and having these thoughts in their head. So the next time when they want to go up to the stage, these memories actually, in a way, stop them or make them feel that they are not good at it.
Well, even worse than that, a lot of times people do it without even having a first experience. They just imagine it being bad anyway. And they start out with a limiting belief so that by the time they have that first experience, they are bad. And, if you think about it, there's really nothing you did good the first time. And you could go down the list. You didn't ride a bicycle well the first time. You didn't have sex well the first time. None of the first times are that great. And, But to expect to walk on a stage and, to be accomplished, we do every year, twice a year, we do a public speaking course. And it's amazing how well people terrify themselves before they get on stage. But, again, if you change the way you think and pay attention to what you should, when you're doing public speaking, your interest should be in the people you're talking to and the sound of your voice. You should listen to it on the outside, not be talking to yourself on the inside. You should think about it from the other people's point of view. If you're paying attention to them, your stomach won't be knotted up, and, you'll become highly skilled after a while. Nobody starts out perfect. Nobody gets perfect, but you move. All you have to do is be better than you were yesterday. I tell my clients this all the time. The more you plan to repeat mistakes, the more you will repeat them. And the more you scare yourself, the more scared you'll be. You'll just get good at being scared. Anything you practice, you get good at. If you're depressed and you practice being depressed, you will become really depressed and you'll get good at it. But if you practice being happy, if you take the same feelings that are spinning and depressing you, you slow them down and spin them in the opposite direction and smile on purpose, right? You'll start practicing being happy. Happy isn't a place you go. It's not a state of consciousness. It's how you do things. You happily open your computer. You happily smile at your children. You happily walk along the beach. It's an adverb. It's not a nominalization. It's not a noun. People come in and they go, I just want to be happy. And I go, you need 6 more dwarves and an unconscious woman and we'll be there. People confuse nouns and verbs all the time. People come in and go, I have frustration. And I go, set it on the table. And of course they can't. They go, well, and I go, if you say stupid things, you're going to think stupid things, and then you're going to do stupid things. It's a bad combination. Until you start thinking it's stupid, you can't be free of it. I know people hate to be wrong. Somebody told me, but my psychiatrist said, and I said, did he ever say anything stupid to you? Think about it. He's just a person. Even I'm going to say things that are stupid to you, but I'm going to tell you when you're saying stupid things to me, because if you stop doing stupid things, you'll have time to do smart things. And it's not that you are stupid, it's that what you're doing is stupid, which means if you stop it, you get smarter. If you're smarter today than you were yesterday, you're headed in the right direction. And the trick is not to have a place you want to be, but a direction to go in. And performance is all about it. Last year, I worked with a golfer who'd won many, many tournaments, but he got stuck. He went into a slump and he hadn't won for a long time, and he hadn't won the big tournament he wanted to. So I'd said to him, when you think about playing, what do you think about? And he said, well, I think about all the tournaments I lost. And I went, good plan. Now you'll be prepared to lose more tournaments. You know exactly how to lose a tournament. You know what you did. You know where you goofed up. You could repeat it in your mind. You're practicing neurologically. You're telling your unconscious, screw this up. And, I work with athletes all the time and hockey players, football players, baseball players. It's always the same thing. They're not planning to do better than they've ever done. You see, the nice thing is everything on planet Earth is built out of imagination. This computer you're looking at, that started out in somebody's imagination. The house you live in, somebody imagined it and then built it. The car you drive, somebody imagined it and then built it. And our neurology follows our ideas. So we need to have a better idea of ourselves than we are. That somebody once said, well, you're saying we should inflate our ego. I said, no, you're giving yourself a direction to go in. You should be rehearsing success that you're not having so that you can start reverse engineering and figure out how to get there. I want to be this person. I want to be somebody who walks through a room full of people smoking and doesn't want a cigarette. If you see yourself being that person, do you want to be them? Because desire creates anticipation. Anticipation creates direction, and direction lines up your neurology to learn. And that's what it's all about in the end, is learning new things.
Right. And Dr. Richard, from the work, what mindset shifts or strategies have you been, have you seen make the biggest difference in helping people, thrive in terms of whatever they are doing?
Well, the biggest mind shift that people make is making the distinction between memories and planning. That if you're planning to be better at what you do, you're lining up your resources to do it. If you're remembering how hard it was to achieve your goals, then you're not planning, you're remembering. And remembering doesn't propel you into the future. It creates a status quo. And I don't mean psychologically, I mean physiologically. Your neurons are running in circles. That what happens is that somebody thinks, oh, well, I couldn't beat this person at this game. I'll probably never be able to beat them. And then they start remembering all the times they lost, reinforcing the neurology that's there. They're not planning to putt better. They're not planning to hit better. They're not planning to throw better pitches. They're not planning to swing their hockey stick better. They're not skating better. They're not running better. They're not jumping better. They're not selling more cars. They're not kissing their wife better. They're not, the list goes on infinitely through every moment of your life. The currency of living is how you spend your moments. And if you don't spend your moments wisely, then you spend them idiotically. And recreating the past is great if the past is great. But even after a while, that will get old. And, planning to do things better. A lot of people, when I got married the first time, people came up to me and said, enjoy it, because, man, it's a thrill the first couple of years, and then it all goes sour. And the first time I was married for 20 years, those 20 years were all great. They kept getting better and better. And my wife passed away of a terrible illness. So a few years after that, I remarried. And when I remarried, I've been married again for another 20 years because I concentrate on making things better. Not perfect, everybody has good and bad days. Sometimes, things get off kilter, but the trick is to get them back in the right direction. I think the Dalai Lama summed it all up on television once. He was interviewed by Ted Koppel, and Ted goes, Dalai Lama, are you really happy? And he goes, oh, yes, Ted, I am very happy. He goes, but sometimes it's like a pool of calm water. You throw a pebble in it and it ripples for a while, but it always calms down. And, to me, that's in a nutshell what you need to do is that the things you worry about, the things you fret about, the things you're unhappy, the things you're dissatisfied with, every time you have something on that list, you should be able to go into the future and imagine what you would be doing to fill that time. Because all the time you spend doing that is burning up the currency of living. What would you do better? Somebody once told me, I'll never find a job. People have told me they'll never find anybody to love. And I said, well, count the number of humans on the planet. There's 7 billion billion people on the planet. Over half of them are women because they live longer. And, I said, and you're going to tell me out of all those people, you've met them all and know they're not the right person for you? And they go, of course not. And I go, well, and instead of sitting around being a grumpy Gus, what would attract people to you? You haven't thought, how should I improve myself so I attract the right kind of person? Maybe I should be more cheerful, more optimistic. Women, when you ask them, what they like in a man, almost the first thing they always say is not that he's tall, not that he's dark, and not that he's handsome. They go, he has a sense of humor. And, and when you're grumpy Gus, who wants to spend time with you? I don't. Even my depressed clients, I give them a bad time for depressing me. If I can get them to laugh about it, then I can get them out of it. It's one of those things where if you're not planning, then you're remembering. And remembering doesn't propel you into the future. Planning does. It changes the way you think, it changes the way you feel, and therefore it changes what you actually do.
And that will be able to propel you forward, or you're always looking your sights
Right.
going forward.
You
Right.
know,
And just a question on performance, since we were talking about that, Dr. Bandler. Now, for me, elite performance is about unlocking the fullest potential for an individual, right? That means being their best version of themselves. Now,
yeah,
in
I
your
wouldn't say fullest, I'd say fuller.
fuller, okay, because so there's always avenue to be better.
If you want to be perfect, you will always be disappointed. You know, disappointment requires adequate planning, just like everything else.
All right. So, in your view, sir, is performance or elite performance something that everyone can achieve?
You can improve your performance. You can improve what you're performing at. You know, you don't want to become a master of depression. You don't want to become a master, you know, of grumpiness. You don't want to become a master. If you're not smiling more of the day than you're doing something wrong. And you should just acknowledge it and start to see yourself being a happier person, and look around and see what you would do to be happier. You know, we're a colony. Every one of us is a colony of 50 trillion cells, all communicating with each other. You know, it's a bloody miracle that we have the consciousness we do, and to use it, you know, and waste the moments that you can spend while you're on this planet. You know, a lot of people look up at the stars at night and they don't look at the miracle. There's as many cells in your brain cells, neurons, as there are stars in the sky. You know, we literally have billions and billions and billions of cells, each talking to 10 to 100 others. The ability for us to alter our thought is literally infinite. And therefore, we should be just amazed at what's possible. And what stops us is we build very rigid representations of the world and then try to squeeze everything in it. The brain is designed to make things familiar, so that when we see one chair and then we learn what it does, the next chair is not a big mystery. We can repeat things. But when you overgeneralize and start, you know, interpreting everything as a slight about you, you know, or every example of what you do is just another failure, all of the things that depressed and unhappy people do, it's not like there's a lot of choices. I mean, I've been doing this for 55 years, and the stories are starting to sound real familiar when people come in and they go, well, I just can't be happy. Well, just is in mathematical terms, the word only. So, you know, when you say, I can only do this, this, and this, well, that's simply not true. The fact that you are doing it is just because you're repeating it. Your neurology is based on the ability to learn new cortical pathways. Typically, pathways run, they loop, they habituate, and then they repeat. That, you know, we only need to put the glass of water up and drink it and set it down, right? And then it's done, right? But if you lifted it up and go, now I don't know what to do, 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 you know, oh, my arm is getting tired and sore, you know, I need a surgeon, right? And oh crap, I spilled it. That always happens. You know, you get caught in a loop that's just idiotic. And I know my example sounds trite, but it's exactly what people do with ideas. They get caught in these loops and they don't realize all you have to do is rethink it. Because as soon as you put something on top of it, it won't function anymore. You know, I can't tell you how many times somebody has come to me with some story of post-traumatic stress. You know, oh, I've got post-traumatic stress syndrome. I was in a war. I was raped. I was beaten up as a child. Then they go down the list. And I go, and so you think about it, you know, how often, how much, how big is the picture, put a border around it, shrink it down to the size of a dime, blink it black and white. Now think about it. Does it bother you? And they go, no. And they go, but it probably will come back. And I go, yeah, you can make it come back, or you can replace it with a better idea that you're going to spend all of this time accomplishing things, manifesting, getting a better job, getting smarter, reading books, all the things that people can do. You know, John Grinder and I I can't tell you how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of journals we read in order to find a few good ideas. And we would sit there, and if we found something good, we'd read it to the other one. And that became the foundation of building a body of knowledge, which has created a new field. And there are literally millions of people doing it now and reading about it. There are hundreds of people stealing it from me alone.
But that's a good thing, right? When they're stealing it, there's a lot of value in that.
They go, I invented this. But it's not about who invented it. It's about what it can do for you. And, along with the techniques and the skills, NLP has left a long history of techniques. Some of them we don't even use anymore because they're outdated. And yet still I meet people and they tell me they became a practitioner and they learned this, and that. And I go, well, that just goes to show you there are lots of people stuck at various levels of my development. And, don't be one of them, read the future. All those leather books up there are all copies of books that I wrote. There are 27 up there alone, and that's not all of them. The reason I keep writing books is I keep having new ideas, and it's new ideas that change the world. I believe it was Einstein that said, imagination is more important than science.
Yes.
More important than education is imagination. That, he did thought experiments in his mind that changed the history of the world forever. And, these didn't come from, experimenting in a lab. They came from experimenting in the world of ideas and then people doing it in labs. And, it came to a lot of good stuff and then some things that are very dangerous. But hopefully we will get smart enough in the future to stop killing each other. That would be a wonderful idea. People should plan on that, and everybody should think about it at the same time. Instead of thinking, if I kill this guy, I'm going to feel good. That's such a ridiculous idea.
Right. And so if there's someone, for our listeners listening today, now, if they wanted to start moving towards becoming a better performer in what they do, what's the very first step that you'll recommend?
Well, it's to look at your time and how you spend it. Real-time management is not wasting thoughts on worrying repeatedly about the same things, but making plans going into the future. Nikola Tesla, who had more patents and more inventions than anybody, what he would do would be to go into the future and then imagine that something existed. And then he would take it apart, find out how it worked, and then reverse what he would have to invent in order to make that machine a reality. So he invented the first generator, the first alternating current, fluorescent light bulbs, and the list goes on and on and on. But even with your life, the same thing is true. If you can't imagine having the life that you want, right? People always tell me, well, if I was a millionaire, I'd be happy. And that's not even true. If you gave them $1 million, they'd have more ways to be unhappy because they haven't figured out how to be happy with $10. If you could be happy with $10, then by the time you get $1 million, you'll be extremely happy. But, it's one of those things where you have to plan on being happy where you are now and then imagining becoming a better person because you want to, so that you're not moving away from your life, you're moving towards a life.
All right. And Dr. Bandler, if there's one system or code, for peak performance that you want every professional to internalize, what would it be?
One thing to be at peak performance, that's not how peak performance works. Peak performance. See, if you learn the meta model, which John Grinder and I created back in the 70s, and it's in lots of my books. Richard Bandler's Guide to Transformation has the meta model the way I use it, not the way a therapist uses it, but the way I use it, so that you know what questions to ask. Questions direct your attention. And when you ask a question, it slices some things off and leaves some things. When you ask why, you start getting reasons to stay stuck. When you ask how, you get stuck. Then it tells you a model so you could stick other people in the same crap you're in. When you start going, how do you know you're stuck? You have to describe what your model of the world is, and then you can peek beyond it and see what else is out there. And so learning how to ask good questions. I use the same questions I use with an individual when I go and talk to hard scientists and they get stuck. I went to a company and they were having trouble developing a certain device, which I won't go into, but they kept saying it's impossible because of this. And, and I said, well, what would happen if those as ifs weren't there? What would it look like? And it turned out it existed. It was a certain, they thought there was no read-write film, and it turned out Plessy had made read-write film, and it was out there. And, years ago when I was working in the sciences, we developed a laser-driven holographic memory system. And, and literally the heads of major corporations, advanced systems planning people told me there was no future for optics in computers. And now every computer has optical systems in it. It was just, they couldn't have been more wrong. But since they didn't conceive of it, and they all had a thing that if it wasn't invented there, it wasn't really a good idea. And that meant there was a lot of stuff they didn't look at. And of course, they didn't look at another company's building materials that they could use to do what they wanted to do, because they kept thinking there wasn't anything. If you don't think something is out there, you don't look for it. If you don't think anybody can love you, you're not looking in the right place. And the first thing to do is to change yourself so that you become somebody that they would want to love, and then you can go after them. Because if you choose opportunities in business based on where things are now, something will always screw you up. If you were in the seminar business, COVID threw a big curveball in there. You couldn't put people in the same room. That made the seminar business, made it tough for restaurants. Some restaurants, the guy who created DoorDash was in the right place at the right time, because he became a billionaire because he started delivering food to everybody. Amazon started out as a bookstore, for Christ's sake, in a garage. And, it's now one of the largest companies in the world, because at one point they pivoted and said, if we're delivering books, we can deliver anything, and, good idea. Out of the list of anything, somebody's going to want something. And, now it's where people go to first. Go to Amazon and see if I can get this. And most of the time, the answer is yes. The only question is when. They have here in the town I live in a fulfillment center that goes on forever. You keep driving and driving and driving, and the same building is there and there and there and there. They kept saying that to me, years ago when I was in the hardware business, that there was no future for archival memory in computers, and that chips would only be able to hold so much information. And, people developed greater flexibility in chips because they had graphic needs. It was for video games, and now they discovered it's good for AI.
Yes.
Oddly enough, Viagra, which has changed people's sex lives, was a heart medicine that had a bad side effect. Everybody got a boner until somebody at one of the companies said, hey, maybe we could use it for that. It's one of those things that it takes a brain to think outside the box. The box is in our head, not in the world. Einstein also said that when a woman asked him, what's the most important thing to know about the universe? And Einstein said that it gives us everything. And everything is possible when you believe it and conceive of it and do it.
Amazing. Oh, thank you, Dr. Bandler. And I wanted to take this opportunity, Dr. Bandler, to tell you that, one of the books that I had read, which was The Transformation that you had written. And
That's
this book
I mentioned.
Yes.
That's the book I mentioned, Richard Bandler's Guide to Transformation.
Yes. So, this was one book that really changed my life. And it was after this book that I wrote the book Elite Performance Blueprint, which I personally mailed to you, which you should be receiving soon. So I would like to.
Bookshelf.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. You received the book?
Yes.
I
received the book and I read the book.
Okay, I'll get the review from you later after the podcast.
Okay.
All right. And now, Dr. Bandler, now that we have come towards the end, any message you would like to leave with our listeners who are, striving, for success?
Failure is a definition of time. You don't fail unless you stop. And if you keep doing the same thing or stopping, you will fail. But if you change the way you think and believe, and it's nothing easier in this world to change than your beliefs. That all you have to do is take the pictures in your mind and replace them with better. You shrink the old pictures down, you put the new pictures up, and then you start acting as if the things you want are going to come to you. And your neurology will line up both consciously and unconsciously to get you headed in the right direction. Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop.
All right, perfect. And thank you so much. And to all the listeners out there, when we are screening these, if you have any questions, do feel free, to write in your questions so that we can look into, or, I can always try to explain some of this stuff. Now, with that, Dr. Bandler, once again, thank you so much for, being in our podcast.
Well, you're more than welcome. I haven't been to Singapore, but I have a lot of friends that come and go from there.
Yes, sir. And when you are here, I would definitely would love to actually catch up with you and, go for lunch with you.
Okay. That's a long ways to go for lunch.
But I'm in US, definitely. I'll look you up. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Bandler.
All right. You bet.
All right. So with that, we will move on, and I'll leave Dr. Bandler in the room. And yeah, so you'll be listening to the Elite Performance channel where, we uncover mission, mindset, and mastery. And I think we had a great session with Dr. Bandler. And, it's always about learning new things whenever I listen to Dr. Bandler's podcast. And today, the honor of being here with him personally online. So remember, Elite Performance isn't just for a chosen few. It's a choice available for all of us who are willing to rise above mediocrity and unlock your potential. So until next week, keep pushing your limits, keep thriving, and under pressure, and keep unlocking your code for elite performance. With that, see ya.